Hello and welcome to the House Einstein podcast. This is House Einstein podcast number 57. I am your host, Osman Parvez, the founder of the House Einstein Real Estate Brokerage, based here in Boulder, Colorado. And with me is the illustrious Hamish Crabb.
Illustrious. Well, good to be here. I'm Hamish Crabb, the assistant of the brokerage, and I help the founding broker quite a bit, and all the agents on the team as well. Good to be here.
You're so much more than the assistant to the brokerage, but I'm going to let you downgrade your role. That's totally fine.
For the long-term listeners, you'll get an idea.
Hamish is a pinch hitter in all things, and he actually is licensed for real estate. He helps with many of our transactions. He can write contracts. He can show property without needing to contact a listing agent for permission, which is what you're supposed to do if you're not licensed. And he also tends to fix things without even being asked to fix things, which we always deeply appreciate.
Handy.
And our mission here is to entertain you first and foremost. And we're here to talk about real estate and help you better understand the market. One thing I should mention is that our lawyers would really like you to understand that if you are contemplating making a real estate decision, an investment decision based on what you hear in this podcast, please remember this podcast is entertainment. If you are actually a client of the brokerage or would like to become a client of the brokerage, visit houseeinstein.com. You can see our bios. You can give us a call directly. And then we are more than happy to advise you about your specific real estate situation. And otherwise, enjoy the show. Topic. So today we're going to discuss something you probably don't know. We're going to jump into a very specific part of the real estate market, the upper end of the market, and talk about how conditions have changed radically over time and where there may or may not be opportunities. We're also going to talk a little bit about market conditions in general, not just confined to that particular price point. In fact, I think what we'll do is first talk about market conditions in general, and then we'll drill down to this particular segment of the market. We're going to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion where we talk about some of our upcoming deals and perhaps our clients that are seeking real estate. We tend to keep that pretty limited, but we want you to know what we have out there, at least a slice of our buyer and seller pool, to highlight what is what the clients we're working for and their personal needs. And then we're going to jump into a segment of the podcast called Sales of the Week, in which we look at several real estate deals that closed last week. We can finally talk about them because they are closed transactions. Mm-hmm. We cannot talk about these transactions when they are available for you to view, when they're on the market, because there are all sorts of rules that prohibit real estate agents from discussing active listings, and we don't violate those rules. But once they're closed, they are fair game, and we've got a lot to say. If you're interested in hearing what we think about active listings, do check out our newsletter. You can sign up for that at houseeinstein.com. And then we have a little section called In the News, where we talk mostly about local real estate news or just local news that we think you might want to know about. And then as an experiment, we're going to continue doing our Carveout section, where we talk about things not necessarily real estate related, just the stuff that happens to be top of mind, stuff we're working on, and that we just want to chat about because we feel like chatting about it. And that is our table of contents for this week's podcast.
It's going to be a good one. I'm excited to jump in. I know we're going to go pretty in-depth into some data, so I'm expecting to learn quite a bit. No pressure.
Well, maybe. I think that we'll tell the listeners almost certainly what they don't know, because if they've only been listening to real estate agents, they are very unlikely to know what's really going on in the market, because agents tend to constantly self-promote and constantly say it's such a great time to buy and it's such a great time to sell, neither of which can be true at the same time. It usually is one or the other, I guess I should say. Maybe not always that it can't be true, but it's rare that it's both true. So yeah, hopefully everyone learns something they didn't know. This podcast is sponsored by House Einstein. We're a real estate brokerage based in Boulder, Colorado. Our market footprint covers Denver to Fort Collins and several mountain resort towns, including Breckenridge and Winter Park. Our goal at House Einstein is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can learn more at houseeinstein.com or our YouTube channel, where you'll find videos on neighborhoods, specific listings, and much, much more. But let's start with the broad overview, and that is that rates are creeping back up, and we are almost back to August levels. These are mortgage rates, and we've had 2 weeks in a row of some pretty steep rate increases. Nationwide, that's resulted in a pretty dramatic downturn to home purchases and refis. The article that covers that the best is out of Bloomberg. You may want to check that out. We'll put a link in the show notes. I think you can view Bloomberg articles for free for a little bit. They let you look at a few of them, or
I was able to register and get a view, yeah.
You can also so this is not a pitch for Bloomberg, and we are not sponsored by Bloomberg, I should add, but their overall quality of the reporting tends to be pretty high when it comes to financial news. So that's why it's on my radar, but you can always sign up for a trial account, which is a few bucks a month, and if it's not making you a lot more money back than that, then you might be doing something wrong with your investment news.
I'll say too.
So yeah.
Sometimes you can get away just copying the headline and putting it into and seeing if there's another news agency that picked it up for free.
You can also go to ChatGPT or go to Gemini and ask it to summarize the latest news about mortgage rates, and you're going to get probably a pretty decent summary. But bottom line is, surprise, the job market is stronger than expected, and the rate cuts that were being modeled in or baked into forecasts are now trending toward the light side, and the 30-year fixed rate mortgage tends to track pretty closely with the 10-year treasury, although they're not directly correlated, but they tend to track pretty closely together. And so the market is no longer expecting aggressive rate cuts, at least in the near term. It's expecting things to be much more gentle. So this is the proverbial soft landing, and I think I saw somewhere that Goldman called it that we have a soft landing. Like, it's no longer will we have a soft landing, we have a soft landing. And even though there's lots of negative economic news out there, statistically we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, it's a lot of news to me. I'm still kind of new in the rates environment and seeing how the jobs reports affects things and this kind of like soft landing talk, right? Like, I didn't have probably a solid bearing on what rates were doing until 2 years ago, or kind of right when I started. So 6.5 kind of feels high to me, but it's not the worst.
It's not horrible when you look back over 30 years. It's not the worst rate by far. Mm-hmm. And it also primarily affects markets that are, I think, kind of mid-market, where most buyers are pretty heavily leveraged. They're putting down 20%. And Boulder County, and the city of Boulder in particular, tends to be a market that the participants are relatively affluent, and they often are buying these properties in cash. Mm-hmm. Or they're getting family assistance that helps them blow way past that 20% down. I remember when I first got into real estate in this market, and I had been doing real estate on Nantucket, which is also in fact, much more affluent market. That's a secondary home market, not a primary home market like Boulder. And for about a year, the market was on the upswing, and then suddenly it had a major drop. That was back in the bubble of 2005 to 2006 era, maybe 2004 to 2006. Mm-hmm. And I started tracking foreclosures in Boulder because I was certain there's going to be a lot of foreclosures. There's going to be a lot of opportunities in distressed property. And the opposite was true, that Boulder had the lowest foreclosure rate of any of the surrounding counties around Boulder. And then within Boulder, the city of Boulder was by far the lowest foreclosure rate of anything else in the county. And the only conclusion I could reach was, well, Boulder buyers, Boulder homeowners tend to be very successful. They tend to be affluent. and they tend to be very secure in their jobs or have lots of options. And Boulder is also incredibly well educated. So people sitting on the sidelines wishing and praying maybe that Boulder sees, distress opportunities will probably see what I saw in the last down cycle, which was non-existent. And that was a horrific down cycle. What we've seen now in the fourth quarter is homes that are selling are substantially lower than what they originally listed for in the spring or in the summer, including some of our listings have cut their price. The one that's been on the market the longest, we've seen a significant price decrease on as the market's come down. So at the same time, Boulder in the city in particular is less sensitive to rate increases or decreases. And that's one of the reasons I've been hammering on this drum that serious buyers, now's the time. Like if you've been on the sidelines for 2 years waiting for price decreases, well, you've gotten them. Mm-hmm. And you're in a lucky position of having an amazing amount of inventory relative to a few years ago. So you have great selection. It's the fall. Yeah. Get in there. And you're probably not going to have better selection in the spring. There will likely be more buyers in the market, but of course there's no crystal ball. And don't sue me for saying that.
No, and we've talked in a pod or two ago about the new type of buyer kind of archetype, the empowered buyer, right? You've got lower prices, and then at the same time, sellers kind of want to get rid of their stuff, so you may have a little bit more leverage there too, in the negotiation process. So,
and
kind
on
of
the sell side,
there. Yeah.
On the buy side, get out there. This is the fall. And this is the best fourth quarter I've seen in many, many years for buyers. For sellers, depending on your property type and location, you may want to wait until the spring. And we'll talk about this more when we talk about our new condo listing, because I think it is the right time for this particular property to hit the market, only because it's so rare. And for somebody that's looking for this type of live-work situation, you see only a handful of these come on market per year. And this particular seller is feeling ready to get this on market. So we're going to move a little faster to help her accomplish that. But I also convinced several potential sellers this year to not list right now because the price range and location they were looking to list in has tons of competition. And there were also other overhangs to the sale process, including major repaint that the property needed, a lot of work to get it ready to sell, and potential litigation in the neighborhood that was possibly slowing things down. And no one buys a house in a market, well, in a neighborhood or a subdivision or development where the association members are suing each other. Like it's just a recipe it's just a recipe for not selling, right? So all right, let's go into a little. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, speaking of competition in different price segments, is that a good segue to our next topic, or?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Hamish, thank you for keeping us on track.
Well, you were about to do it. I just wanted to throw a segue in there.
You could throw a segue. Do you have anything else to say about, you're as a home buyer, a recent home buyer, I feel like you were very sensitive to rates.
Super.
And you were like trying to game the system to save like $25 a month.
I think I got away with a little bit. Yeah. And since then, right, you get something I didn't know during the home buying process is you kind of get a choice to lock in your rate or see how things shake out. I think like a week or two down or a little bit closer to the closing date when you're, financing. And ever since I locked in, I've been obsessively checking rates, kind of hoping to go and like refi or something. But at the same time, they haven't, I'm glad I locked in. They still aren't down where I bought. So yeah, there's like definitely kind of that level of sensitivity with it. The first house that we put an offer in Osmond, and it's Zillow estimate, so there's nothing too much to say about it. But the Zillow estimate's probably like $150,000 over what it was when we put in our offer, which is crazy. This house is a little bit, it's only a little bit higher than what we paid, but at the same time, it's what can you afford, and can you make it work. Also, we had an agent that didn't talk to us in the slightest or give us any offer guidance and ended up having 18 offers come in. So I think there was a bit of mismanagement there too, because I could have gone higher on that offer.
See, this is the thing
Yeah.
about regret with home buying, Hamish. As you just illustrated, it's the one that got away that you don't stop thinking about. Like, you're still tracking the Zillow values
I
of the
just
homes
checked
you don't
it for the
own.
first time in like a year and a half this week, and I think it was for. I was looking at something that we did in the contract, so I could like refer it to something else. But yeah, I ended up looking at it. I like this address more; it rolls off the tongue better, for what it's worth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I tend to tell people, do not do that. Don't go look at what
Yeah.
the home was worth that you didn't get. Just let it go.
It really doesn't
And
follow
yes,
me, right? It's bygones.
We're no longer in a market that has 18 offers on a listing. Thank God.
Yeah.
We're in a much more rational market. But then and now, vet your agent and talk to them about how they handle offer process, how they handle not just marketing the home, but how they negotiate. What are their thoughts to negotiation? What's their philosophy for how they manage when more than one buyer is interested? How do they help you increase the sale price and limit your exposure, your liability in that sale? And if they seem confused by these questions, get a better agent, because that's actually what we often do when we are the listing agent.
And also how often you hear an agent say, oh, I had some sellers reach out, but I know it's not the best time for them to sell, so I told them that, and we're waiting, Like, talk about integrity.
I mean, I'm honestly trying to... So when I see somebody trying to sell a really good property, particularly one that could be a really good rental property, I'm often trying to help them not sell it. Like, like show them other options than sell this property. But we don't...
At the end of the day, we're not the property owners, right?
Right. Well, if they want to sell it and they decide they want to sell it, our mission is to help them maximize the sale price, not to push them out of their decision to sell it, particularly given that we get paid to sell the property. We don't get paid to tell people not to sell their properties. But I would say more than 50% of the time when people approach me to list a property, that's one of the first conversations we have is there a way you can keep this thing? Because Boulder real estate is some of the safest real estate in the country historically.
Entertainment only, this podcast.
Yes, and this podcast is don't go holding your real estate based on what you just heard. I feel like we live in such a litigious world. You have to say things like that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive deeper into the segment of the market that most people probably have no clue what's happening, and in fact, I would say most potential buyers and sellers that actually in this market segment don't have the data to make intelligent decisions, and most agents don't track it closely enough to tell you what's really going on. So there are some agents that really know their business. I will be clear about that, and I like working with those colleagues, but the ones that don't know what they're doing really are the majority. So we're going to look at the $3 million to $5 million price point, that tranche of listings. It's relatively arbitrary, that range. Back in 2005, when I used to track the luxury end of the market, I think I set a threshold of 1 to 2 million. But that was 20 years ago. Today, 3 to 5 is probably a little more appropriate for what most people would feel is a more luxurious listing in the city of Boulder. There are certainly listings over 5 million, and there's a lot of listings under 3 million too. But once you cross that $3 million threshold, your opportunities really open up, and you start to see things that are much more on the luxury end of the market. And as of this podcast, actually as of yesterday when I pulled the data, there were 32 available listings. These are single-family detached houses in the city of Boulder. And I'll caveat that a little bit because we've recently started seeing a lot of garbage in the MLS, even
Dirty
more
data.
than normal.
Yeah.
Even more than normal. And agents are confusing a field called locale. And locale was relevant for most of the last 30 years because you had a book that had locale in it and broke up the MLS by regions and numbers. No one's using that book anymore. And a whole bunch of agents from outside the city of Boulder are using the locale field as the general vicinity. They just want Boulder on their property for some reason. And so we're seeing listings from Longmont. I saw a listing in Estes that had Boulder locale. It was absurd. So the short answer is, let me finish this thought, Hamish, and then we're going to jump to you. Short answer is we're now using, when I say City of Boulder, I'm talking about a map of approximately the city boundaries that I use. It will likely have a few listings or a few properties, not listings, but within that map of all of the property, there are a few pockets of unincorporated Boulder County. And it's very challenging to tease those out without a very detailed manual search. So we're just using a map that I drew and saying that's the city of Boulder for the vast majority of people. And for purposes of this analysis, that's good enough. Okay, yeah. Hamish, you were saying...
Yeah, just last week we were looking at potential properties with a buyer, and the subdivision, the agent put Boulder. And it's like, okay.
Boulder as the subdivision?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So when you're looking at any data analysis on any market in the whole country, you have to ask these questions about how good is this data, and the more relevant information goes right down to neighborhood level information, not city level. And even when there is city, sometimes there's confusion over city and county, and the data, the noise starts to grow. So I feel confident as a former investment analyst that this is good data for the city of Boulder. And in that $3 to $5 million range, which we're arbitrarily calling luxury, there are only 4 listings out of 32 under contract. So that's 12.5% of listings that currently have a buyer. And that means roughly 87% of listings are completely available for you to go buy, which is phenomenal, right? And when they talk about what is a balanced market, they say roughly 5 months of inventory. Well, when you extrapolate 12.5% listings under contract out of 32 available, you have a buyer's market in this price range. There's no arguing that there's not a buyer's market in the city of Boulder between 3 and 5 million. And any agent that's expressing that it's not a buyer's market just doesn't know the facts, or they're trying to sell you something. That's what's really happening in this market. So we also have a lot more listings available. Hang on, did I have that
inventory
data?
Available?
Yeah. So, I don't have that specifically broken out. So I'm going to stop and pause there and say, hold up. I know that's true, but I didn't pull that data point. And the MLS makes it challenging to go back in time to pull that data point. So and this is one thing you'll find if you ever work with me as your agent, is that I don't just talk about what feels right. I will tell you the data source.
And show it
to you if you want to see it.
Yeah.
And in this case, in terms of available listings in this price point, we can do that analysis, actually, but I didn't do it for this podcast. So let's hold off on that data point. But what I will say is that from the last 6 months, so I think that's April, May, June, July, August, September, right? Mm-hmm. That's the second and the third quarter. There was a 31% decrease in sales volume of these $3 to $5 million listings. So sales have dropped 31%. Only 12.5% is under contract right now, which means 87% availability of homes in this price point right now. And of the ones that are currently available, the complete days on market is over 6 months. The average complete days on market.
Yeah, that's right.
So right. And I'm getting very nuanced here because I said complete days on market because some people have this habit of refreshing their listing and pretending it wasn't available for a week and trying to reset the days on market, which is nonsense. Any agent that's competent can pull the complete days on market to the point where the MLS even lists CDOM, complete days on market. It's not perfect. There's some noise in that, but it is now for this price range, the average complete days on market is over 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it was like 188 days or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? I think it was 6.2 months when we divided it by the 30-day representing a month. So what does this point to? And I've said this in the last podcast, but now I'm getting very granular. This is a buyer's market in this price range, in this location, the city of Boulder. This is an opportunity. We're in the fourth quarter. early fourth quarter or when the best deals typically are happening, you should be looking at listings that, of course, fit your needs, are in the locations you want. But if they've been owned for a long time, meaning that the seller has a lot of equity, and it's been on the market a long time, which most of these have, then you shouldn't be ashamed to offer low. And if the seller is offended, the seller is offended. That's fine. There's a whole negotiation process to helping you get the best deal, and anchoring the seller with a low price is not the worst thing in the world. Of course, that anchor applies to whether it's you offering in the future or someone else offering in the future. So there's a downside to anchoring, but to low offer anchoring. But now is the time, if you're looking to test sellers on their commitment to their price point and their confidence in their price point, now is the time. It's also the time of year where I've been able to negotiate some serious discounts from the preceding list price. So, and that comes into play with a lot of due diligence on first making sure it's the right house, because the best deal on the wrong house is the wrong deal, right? That's not a good choice. But if it is the right house, helping you get an amazing price on that property is part of what we do. And if you want to know which houses meet the criteria that might make good low offer targets, check out our newsletter. I have committed to getting it out in the next week, and likely by the time you hear this, it'll be only a day or two away to the latest fresh listings newsletter, which is House Einstein's newsletter. And I can't talk about active listings here on the pod or anywhere public, but in the newsletter, that is our client newsletter, I can discuss those active listings and my honest thoughts about which ones might make for a good low offer target, without saying that the seller is going to accept your low offer, but I'll walk you through what makes for a good low offer target.
The criteria, right?
Yeah. Well, with specific listings, I'll pull out a few that I think would actually be worth a second look and potentially worth a low offer. And
I'm excited for a newsletter, man. I enjoy reading them, so yeah, I'm ready to have one come out.
I hope I remember how to write.
You'll get there. You could even read some older ones and make sure you still got it right.
I might have to. All right, so that is our topic du jour, and hopefully that added some value to you as you consider the local real estate market, either here in Boulder or in your own locations. We also, by the way, serve Denver. We serve Fort Collins. We serve Louisville and Lafayette and Longmont. As you'll see, when we get to talking about sales of the week, we have some that aren't even here in our fair city. They are in Longmont. They're in Nederland. We cover these areas, but I live in Boulder, and the brokerage is based in Boulder, and Hamish is only 20 minutes away.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got a pretty big footprint of what we cover, and we like our data so we can dive in. We've got MLS access to all these markets, and we can really drill down. So speaking of market conditions,
we already covered market conditions.
Oh, okay, that was a oneer.
So let's put we need to move market conditions in the show notes up, but we already covered it. We're now moving on to shameless self-promotion. And in this segment, we're just going to touch base a little bit about some clients that we're working with. And this is not representative of all the clients we're working with, but it is representative of a couple of clients we think deserve shout-outs at this time. One is a new listing that we will have on the market in the next few weeks. It is not on the MLS right now, but we will get it there soon. And I can't give you the address. I can't tell you much more other than some basics. And that is, it is a live-work property. It does have a very nice office that is on the ground level with a sidewalk that people walk by every day. That would be a great place to put some signage up. And this type of office would be perfect for a therapist, for somebody that needs a home office, anybody that occasionally has a client that comes in the door or a patient that comes in the door. It has a bathroom. It's only a few hundred square feet, but it's a really lovely space. It has tall ceilings, lots of glass, lots of windows and light to come into the unit. It's going to be very reasonably priced. And there's an apartment above it, a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment above it.
Okay.
And there's a 1-car garage. So, and most importantly, of course, the office has a bathroom that your client or patient can use when they come and visit. It's a very nice professional presentation. If you have a business that is client forward facing, like you're going to interact one-on-one with a client or a patient, this is a great spot for that. And it's in a location that just keeps getting better. And I don't really want to say much more because it'll be too easy for you to guess what property I'm talking about. But it is now listed with us, meaning that our listing agreement is executed, and we're going to do some updates and cleaning up the place and get it ready and on the market. We're going to be putting together our usual videography, photography, all the Instagram stuff on this particular property, and you'll learn more about it in a few weeks. Or if you happen to be interested in it, just pick up the phone and call me. The other shameless self-promotions on the buy side, and this is for a really good client and friend, became a friend over many years and started as a client, and they're back to being a client. And what they're looking for is a rambling ranch, probably in a neighborhood like Fraser Meadows with a larger than typical lot for Boulder. Fraser Meadows as a whole, all of the lots are larger than typical for the most part. Most of the lots, I should say.
Most of the ones I've seen, yeah.
They want the middle bowl of porridge. They don't want a giant house. And so at least probably about 2,000 square feet on the main, maybe 3,000 square feet. It doesn't have to have a basement. So I would say 3,000 is probably the sweet spot. 2-car detached garage, quieter street, and hopefully a home that has some high quality updates that the owner put in themselves, not a cheap flip, not a spec project, but a home that the owner invested in maybe in the last 10 years, really putting in some quality updates. This buyer will gladly pay fair market value, maybe more, for this property. And extremely ethical, tons of integrity. It will not be a waste of your time to call us if you happen to have a property like that. It's not only Fraser Meadows, of course, but a flat lot and not having stairs or limited stairs are really important. The stairs inside are much more important, of course, than a flat lot, but it's nice to have a flatter lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to add too much time, so I had some to go on there, but
I see you added something. What's happening this weekend, Heyman?
Yeah, this weekend, as part of kind of our push, and I think we've touched on it a little bit with the new NAR settlement. There's the requirement of buyer agencies out front, and it's unsurprising that can be unsettling to some buyers. So to make it a little bit easier for y'all out there who are on the search, we're holding consistent open houses. You can come in unrepresented, check out the house, see if it's a good fit for you. And this weekend, we have our gorgeous listing in Table Mesa, 1380 Knox Drive. Ian and Sophie will be hosting that one on Sunday from 12 to 2, Sunday the 20th. And then Osman, you're hosting Alpine this weekend too on Saturday?
That is the plan. So 605 Alpine, I have not put it on the MLS yet, so it's not visible on Zillow, but by the time you hear this, it will be. 605 Alpine will be hosted on Saturday, likely late morning. So if you're interested in learning about Tesla solar shingles and battery backup systems and why this particular house is so attractive with its orientation and location and privacy, come out and visit me. I'll be at 605 Alpine. I'm happy to talk to you about market conditions, about what's going on in the real estate world, how it's structurally changing, and of course I'll also tell you all the ways that we can help you make smart decisions in real estate.
Absolutely. Well, that was a pretty solid weekend shameless plug. I hope to see some of you guys out there. I'll be at Knox Drive on Sunday, and I might swing by and say hi to you, Oz, on Saturday.
Sounds good.
Also, the new signs get here today, so I get to play with those. Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Alrighty.
All right, so our next segment is Sales of the Week. And last week we were forced to do this very quickly because, well, I had to go. I had a client meeting. And so we had to wrap it up. And that forced me to do it within 5 minutes. I did basically a minute or so per listing, which might have been a little too fast. But I realized that that might have actually been entertaining for you. I didn't see any feedback about the speed in which I rambled through that. So we're going to continue doing it, but we're going to do it a little bit more structured. And so there are 4. Say that again, Hamish?
Are you going to feature these ones in the newsletter?
Sure.
Okay. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Then perfect opportunity for a plug. If this condensed version doesn't do it for you, check out our newsletter for the full uncapped version as well. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And what we're going to do is we're going to start a timer. So we're only going to cover 4 properties. I'm going to try to do it in 10 minutes. And we're going to ramble through these and point out some things that you probably didn't know about these recent transactions. And we'll see how we do on time. Are you ready to start the timer, Hamish?
So it sounds like you get 2.5 minutes per property.
Well, roughly. That's a good pacing. As long as I get it done. There's 4 times 2.5. That's 10 minutes. So, yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to see if I can follow along with you. Are you ready?
All right.
3.
Boom. Let's make it happen.
Go.
Our first property is 523 Arkansas Mountain Road. And this is a property I've been watching closely because it's right here in my neighborhood in 4 Mile, or right at the top of Sugarloaf. This is right at the cusp of the two canyons. And it's a property that was originally listed, 2022. And it was listed by a very competent agent, but it did not attract a buyer. She kept it at that price all the way for a year. They did not change the price. And then it came back. It was withdrawn. No, sorry. I apologize. There's 2 MLS numbers. This is the confusing part. It did drop the price in April of 2023 by 100. So it was listed at 1.95 in September 2022, which is not the best time of year to sell a house. And then it dropped to 1.895 in April. And then it dropped to 1.795 in July. And this is July of last year. And then they pulled it off the market in October. The listing was still under the control of that agent. It finally expired in March. And they hired a new agent in April. And that agent, who eventually did sell the house this year, a minute 30, got to go faster, listed it at 1.685. And then pretty much monthly started cutting the price. Cut it at a small number in May, cut it by 150 in June, cut it by another 50 in July, and cut it all the way down to 1.4 million in August of this year, when finally it went under contract and sold for 1.331514, a very specific number.
Yeah.
Probably negotiated some specific item that brought that concession into play for that very specific amount of money. This property is literally a 10-minute walk from my house. And during the course, I watched it closely. I even saw the property in person. By the way, it's Joe Walsh's house. That's the other piece I should mention. This might take longer than 10 minutes.
That Joe name Walsh, is not familiar. Yeah, go for it.
So Joe Walsh of the Eagles used to live in this house. Huh. I'm pretty sure he actually built it. And I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for one of the neighbors who mentioned it. But yes, this is Joe Walsh's house. So during the course of the listing, after they had gotten rid of their first agent, I noticed another one of our neighbors who's very into agriculture, and he does a lot of work up here on mountain properties. He took down a ton of trees. And once he took down those trees, the property showed so much better. Like, all those views became much more apparent. And if you look at the photos, it really, it looks like a much newer home than it really was. So the issue with this property was you walked in and it had low ceilings throughout most of it. It felt very much like the seller's house, like it was full of the seller's things. And the 70s era design was not particularly compelling, and the views were mostly blocked. And once they did better photography, they removed the trees, they did better photography, they priced it much more aggressively. They never mentioned Joe Walsh, which frankly they should have. I think that would have created some excitement. I mean, he is a major player in the music industry. That house finally sold, and it took a long time, and this illustrates also that sometimes mountain properties take a long time to sell. And that's reality for the mountains, and it's getting worse with higher insurance rates impacting the market. Okay, so that's that deal.
Nice.
And Jimmy does do a lot of mountain properties. In fact, he was the other side of my deal. And he does have a lot of specialized knowledge. I'd like to think I compete with him head-to-head on that, but he's also got probably 20 years longer doing it. But there's a whole bunch of other aspects to that, so happy to talk to you about it in person. Next one, 5 Caribou Ridge Drive. So this particular property is up in Nederland, right above the town. And the whole Caribou Ridge neighborhood was developed within the last, I want to say 10 years. I have to pull that up to know exactly the number of years. But the particular reason why I wanted to include this deal was that Nederland continues to aspenize. And I've written about this many times in the newsletter, that with the way that Nederland is positioned with its own little ski resort, with improving restaurants, within a 35-minute drive to Boulder, not on I-70, and as Boulder continues to become more affluent, Nederland continues to become more like a mountain resort town, not like the quirky little mountain town that we all know and love from 20 plus years ago.
We still have Ward for that.
Yeah, well, a whole other level of quirky fun in Ward. But Ned used to be a little bit more mountain town, a little bit more Wild West feeling, and now it's gradually becoming much more affluent. And this property is an example of what is up there. And there's not a lot, but this is one of the higher end homes built in 2021 on a 14,000 square foot lot, so plenty of room, 4 bedrooms, 5 baths, 4,500 square feet house, very functional. You can use it as a second home and enjoy Nederland's Eldora ski resort. You can also enjoy the mountain towns or hiking and mountain biking all from your front door. You can wander into town and hit the bars and the restaurants too. It's not that far of a walk. So fantastic property in terms of its function. And if you look at the photos, it captures that essence of what people look for in sort of a modern interior and then a rugged mountain kind of exterior.
It comes across very high end too.
Absolutely. It is high end. Well,
very stunning.
It's not really high. It's not high end the way that you will find $4 and $5 million listings here in Boulder, but it's high end for when you think about a mountain property. This really checked all those boxes. So deal notes, it was only on the market about 45 days officially, so probably really a little over a month. You do have a few days before you have to change the status. It was listed in August at 2.495. It went under contract in mid-September, and it closed at 2.295. So roughly $200,000 below the list price, and there were no additional disclosed concessions in the deal. It was a cash deal, $200,000 below list. Not a bad discount, and a pretty nice mountain property. It sold at a relatively quick rate. So that's what people are looking for, and there will be others. There's probably 1 or 2 of these a year around Nederland that sell that really are this turnkey, and this perfect for what most people would find to be a perfect kind of mountain house experience.
Yeah, I really like this one. Thanks for putting that one in.
Yep.
That was 3 minutes.
Let's keep going. 409 Gay Street. So this property is in Old Town, Longmont. It's on the west side of Old Town, which is generally considered to be sort of the older, more established Old Town neighborhood. It's very close to one of our favorite restaurants, the West End, and it was listed. So this home was built in 2006. So even though it looks historic, it is not historic, but the design of it is very much fitting with the neighborhood. And I love it when you see sort of that historic design but modernized, which means all the spaces are larger, the ceilings are taller, the layout is better, the storage is night and day better, and you're buying in one of... Say that again.
So no kidding, and looking at the basement too, that's like you kind of get the modern construction techniques too.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. You have a basement foundation that's not crumbling in on itself with a short ceiling and dark and musty after 100 years of use. You have a home that it's classic in all of the ways it looks. It has a detached garage, and it was right in Old Town. in a very attractive location. So no surprise, if it was priced right, even in a relatively soft market, it sells quickly if it's marketed correctly too, and if it's as attractive of an asset. So the thing about buying real estate is that sometimes the deal is really made on the purchase, right? Like buying a home like this, you may pay more than others if you're buying it in a hot market. Or in this case, they clearly redeveloped it themselves because they acquired the property in 2004 for only 180, and likely they scraped the house that was there and built this amazing property. And they were almost certainly the first owners. It was on the market just 6 days, originally listed for 1.45, and it had a long contract period, which is not necessarily unusual. It might have been something along the lines of the buyer and seller just needed more time. One of the two needed more time, and everyone agreed to it. So the way you structure that is you go through the contract faster, but you leave the closing longer. Mm-hmm. That garage, by the way, Hamish, is 720 square feet. So I've got garage envy.
Find that again, yeah.
5,200 square foot home. Anyway, it sold for just $25,000 below list after less than a week on market. And I think these people got a fantastic deal on an amazing house, and definitely will be in the newsletter.
Hey, is that a shared driveway?
Oh, good question. It might be. Hamish, it's no fair if you ask detailed questions.
You actually made that one on time. You made that.
Keep us. Yeah. Well, we're now way past 10 minutes, but we're gonna try to wrap it up quickly. So I will say I'm not sure about the shared driveway, but if it is a shared driveway, you want to understand the easement that governs the maintenance of that driveway, the agreements, and you also want to meet the neighbor to see how that's going to work out with them. But a relatively low risk. Most people are perfectly fine. It might mean you have somebody that helps shovel and somebody that helps maintain it over time. But it also might mean that you can't just park the car right in the driveway at the beginning. You might have to use that 3-car garage. Oh, so, no. All right,
moving on.
Let's jump on to the very last one. Let's swing back to the city of Boulder. And in this case, we are just outside the city on the east side on Baseline Road. So Baseline is a pretty busy road, but it also has these unique little parcels that are just south of the road, but they're kind of deep lots. So it's set back a little bit and probably far enough to give you the privacy you want while you're surrounded by all this open space that's abutting the property. So a couple things. The home itself was built in 2021. It's only on 2.4 acres, and a key selling point is the open space, but it uses the word protected in the listing. And I got to say that's a really dangerous word. And buyers should do their due diligence on the conservation easements that actually protect you from experiencing a degree of development next door, because Colorado is in a housing crisis, and every developable lot is going to attract someone to build something on it over time. And historically, our community has bought a lot of farmlands and put them under conservation easement, which usually means paying the owner a significant amount of money to lock down that land from future development for a whole host of reasons. And there's a whole lot of controversy around this, although there shouldn't be, in my opinion. I love our open space, but it is something that you as a buyer really want to understand. So not just your property and its view, but the adjoining properties and how they are limited in their development rights. But that's how this property was marketed, and so we'll assume for a moment that truly it was protected, the views around the property, the open space around the property. And I think this is a really cool house. So let's get to the sexy part. Yep. Total square footage, it's 2 houses. Total square footage between the 2 houses was 5,200 square feet, had a 3-car attached garage, totals of 5 bedrooms and 4 baths, and a nice 2.4 acre lot. And when you look at the photography, you again see a great example of what I think of as modern Colorado home design. It has design elements that hint to our history, including the stonework on the outside finish, the post and beam interior, the chandelier with the antlers I could probably pass on, but they did a good job. making that look a little more contemporary. I'm also not a huge fan of the candelabra style stuff, but that's all personal taste. But the post and beam and the really tall ceilings, the paint scheme, the natural wood, not too dark, the giant windows, the black trim. I'm annoyed by black trim at this point, but it's still what's current. So this is a great example. It's like everything. Like if you're going to put in windows, they better be black.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, get hot. We live in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't great
for hot too.
Yeah. So, but everything about this house is so nicely done. It just speaks to a high degree of quality in the construction, and also the fact that they lived there a few years means that you're not looking at a cheap flip.
Yeah, or they put up with it for a few years.
Yeah, well,
I'm just
probably not.
Yeah.
I hear you, but probably not. They probably built it just for themselves as a dream home, and for whatever reason, life happens. They decided to sell it, and so it was on the market a significant period of time. So here's the listing history. It hit the market in June at 4.75, and the seller was confident in their price. They did not cut the price at all. And this is why it's really important to understand what you got and wait. Sometimes you have to wait for the right buyer. And you also need to do a good job of explaining the deal points, because a buyer that is looking at the cost to develop it themselves, the time involved, the attention involved from whatever else they're doing versus just write a check and have the house. What's the premium on your time? And in this case, this turnkey house eventually did find a buyer. They did negotiate $100,000 off, which is frankly a relatively token negotiated discount just to make someone feel better. Perhaps they offered a lot lower to try to get the deal. Who knows what they offered? But they agreed, and I agree, the value's there. So this is more toward the high end of that $3 to $5 million range. And perhaps they tried to aggressively get a deal, and the seller told them perhaps not. We know what the house is worth. So that's the other end of knowing that only 12.5% of homes in this price range are under contract. And that's also knowing that just because it's been on the market 90 days doesn't mean the seller is going to capitulate. Some sellers might. This one did not. And sometimes the deal is that the seller is just not willing to let it go for a big discount. And that's what you see here. But absolutely amazing property in so many ways. I kind of wish it was mine, but
good listing agent too,
and great listing agent. We've had great deals with the listing agent Patrick Brown, very professional and fun to work with. So they chose well. I mean, they could have chose us, but they chose pretty well. So.
Humble.
They did all right.
Yeah,
humble. Exactly. All right, Hamish. So that took 16,
that timer.
almost 17 minutes. And I guess time flies when I got a lot to say. I did my best.
We'll work on that one too, because we might have to, reserve. Maybe I get like 45 seconds or a minute at the end of each, 2.5 minutes you get as well. But pretty good first implementation.
All right, that's a good point. Like if I'm just going for the time run, we don't get to hear from you. Is there anything you really want to add about any of these 4 listings before we move off?
I condensed my thoughts down, and I think I got them in. Let me just quickly see what we've got. Arkansas was cool. Gay Street was sweet. Gay Street, I think, really just took me by surprise because the lead photo, and honestly all the photos that I saw, made it look a lot smaller. And then when you did mention the square footage, like that is a large home. That just shocked me a bit. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
I didn't think it was that large, but it's generously sized. It's reasonable.
5,200 square feet. Yeah.
I mean, Jordan's house is like 25,000 square feet or something, right? Like some insane number. Celebrities have these monstrous houses. But for ordinary folks, a 5,000 square foot house is plenty. And more of our clients, just as for people that are listening to this, don't want giant houses. They would prefer something in the 3,000 to 4,000 range. That's the sweet spot. And having seen this story now play out so many times, if we were to ever get in the spec business, I would be very unlikely to build these giant houses. I think that's a great way to lose a lot of money. The smarter one to build is this 3 to maybe 5,500 square foot functional 4 to 5 bedrooms, secondary structures. So that's what was really attractive about that house on Baseline, is that it's basically a family estate, right?
Yeah.
You have 2 reasonable sized properties. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's one thing I was looking at on the street view, is the, or not street view, but satellite view. It was kind of interesting to put together. Seeing that it's 2 different buildings makes a lot more sense. I was like, is the neighbor just part of the house? But yeah.
I will say that it's a really smart development to do family estate style housing. The need of the number of boomers that are approaching the age where they need assisted living and they would prefer to live with family, that creates a huge market opportunity for the creation of multi-generational housing for what I'm calling an estate buyer. But it doesn't need to be truly affluent people. Everybody wants this because you can take care of your family and also have them be in their own house.
Yeah. And as we've discussed in quite a few previous podcasts, Boulder's kind of restriction on some of the zoning for ADUs, or the conversation around that, we might be seeing, not to this scale and grandeur, but we might be seeing a lot more ADUs popping up for the potential of this kind of multi-generational housing as one of the use cases. Yeah.
Over the kicking and screaming and crying of our city because we're being forced to do it. And that we can thank.
Now, don't I remember you
state.
saying if the city does it, it means we voted for it, or something like that? Or
well, if the state does it, the state is imposing its
good point.
Its will. Okay, so let's get to the news. And in this case, I feel like we're talking about news that is just more fun to talk about, because the news, and the local news in particular, is just full of a lot of depressing stories.
Especially when we looked today, we were like, we're not going to cover this. We're trying to keep it upbeat.
We're gonna cover happier stories, and this one is a little happier. So, Boulder just announced yesterday, that the Vesper Trail is opened again, and this is a trail that is on the north side of Heatherwood, which is a neighborhood in Gun Barrel. And most people don't realize that there's tons of open space all over Boulder with trails in it. It's not just in the foothills. And this is one of those. And the open space that's sort of out in the plains is scenic. You have great mountain views frequently, and you have all sorts of other types of wildlife. And it's more gentle rolling terrain, so you don't have to be the most fit athlete to enjoy flatter open space. And anyway, this trail was closed because there were nesting, burrowing owls, and those nesting owls managed to raise 8 owlets. And I don't know, Hamish, I love the term owlet. Like, that's just such a fun term. And these burrowing owls were federally protected because their populations are on the decline throughout Colorado. So it's really nice to see 8 little owlets be born. And it's also really nice to have the trail open again. So that's a little success story. Maybe we can find a photo to stick in the show notes for the burrowing owlets that have been successfully, what's it called when they leave the nest? Fledged.
Yeah, nice. You got it. Well, it didn't spring immediately to mind, but Westminster's most unfortunate bald eagle couple have successfully fledged their own this year as well. Stanley Lakes had a bald eagle pair for a couple of years, and their last nest got struck by lightning, and before then they also failed, so they finally had a successful one. You just reminded me of it. Yeah.
It just seems astounding at how often bird nesting fails. It makes you wonder how all these birds are even around.
Because of government drones.
Went here at our house, and I hope my wife doesn't hear this podcast, but there were 3 little baby birds, and the next day there were no baby birds. And I'm pretty sure the nest got raided overnight. And it was sort of sad. I'm like, well, that's birdie business.
It's the price you pay for being able to fly,
But one of them had fallen out of almost fell out of the nest. Leah noticed that it had kind of half fallen out. And so we had gotten a stepladder out and very carefully using a utensil, not our skin, so we didn't put our scent on it.
That's a myth.
Gently lifted it up and into the nest. And this is like 5 days earlier. So it was particularly tragic. And I had to tell her, please just don't get emotionally attached. Like, this is bird business. We're intervening with nature, or interfering with nature right now anyway, by helping this baby bird not fall out of the garage nest. But yeah.
Yeah. You're breaking your documentary videographer oath. Nature documentary. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is a fun segue. We were looking at the news. It was mostly downhill. But this next story isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It's more stars and comets and auroras.
I don't know if it's a story or just the fact that we're just commenting on the fact our social media feed is just filled with photos of the aurora borealis. They're also called the northern lights, and these amazing comet photos. It's been really lovely to see all those, and I don't really have much else to say about it other than
just an honorable mention.
In ancient times, the sign of a comet was sometimes perceived as an omen of great change, and I don't believe that personally, but it's kind of cool to see such an amazing spectacle in our night sky.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm going to try and get out there and get some photos over the next few nights and see where we go with that.
Will you be bringing your new lens? Let's head to the Carveout section, Hamish.
Perfect little segue. That was a minute and like 5 seconds, that little news section. Just writing out the time codes. So if you've been following, I perhaps impulse bought a tilt shift lens from Instagram reel ad that I got probably about a week ago now, and it arrived yesterday. It is a very intense zoom lens with my camera set up, so it's for those who celebrate and know cameras, it's a 50 millimeter full frame, but on a micro four thirds camera it is essentially a 100 millimeter equivalent, so it's quite the zoom. It's f1.4, which on a micro four thirds becomes 2.8. Getting all that out of the way, it's a lot of fun, Oz. It's the sharpness is actually more surprisingly quality than I thought it would be, and having focus peeking on the screen as I pivot the lens around, you can kind of see how the plane of focus changes on the screen, and it's a lot of fun. It's definitely not as precise as, say, one that has a screw that you turn and you can directly pivot or anything, but I should be able to get some of the fun, like, miniaturization effects out of it. And then the more I'm looking up about it, and it's smart to buy the thing and then look up how to use it, but the more I'm finding out about it is that there's some use for landscape photography, and then some people do architecture with it too. So no promises that anybody listening will see some results out of it, but
how about you go ahead and post a few photos on House Einstein's social after you play with it. Post like a little carousel, and you can reference back to the podcast. This is some of the initial photos coming out of the tilt shift lens. I definitely have seen the miniaturization effect. It sounds like it only is for still, right? Not for videography.
I've heard different.
Okay, we'll come back to that. It'd be cool to see video. But in the photos you've already shared, your initial shots, it just sort of looks like the outside of there's a focal point in the middle of the frame, and then there's a lot of blur effect on the outsides of the frame.
Pretty much. I mean, you can put the focal point kind of wherever you want. So that first one, it's only on the left side of the picture, right? And it's like when you're... And I wonder if I can record my screen showing the focus peaking, how it highlights in red as I'm adjusting focus. But, you adjust a normal camera focus and you can see it coming from the foreground all the way out to the background. This is more like a line that only covers part of the screen, more in a vertical line or a horizontal line. It doesn't do the whole plane. So it's kind of interesting. And
it is interesting. Yeah. But how is that different than just in Photoshop?
It's not.
Blurring like doing a Gaussian blur with a mask that's in an oval shape.
The only and apparently, like, I was looking and doing my research after buying the lens. One of the videos was saying that doing it in post is as good, or if not maybe a bit better. But playing with the focus ring and looking around and stuff, it does warp some things in interesting ways. So I don't really have that part of it figured out, or how to reliably manipulate the miniaturization effect. But I think once I get out on some walks and maybe look at a comet or something, I'll be able to use it a little bit more intentionally. Right now it's definitely just like swiveling the lens and turning rings and stuff until I get something in focus or my desired effect. But the idea of being able to just use post is totally reasonable. Same with like rolling dolly shots and stuff like that. You can do them with post, but there is something cool about shooting them natively.
Sure.
I don't know. Yeah.
All right.
Plus, I got to justify this, man.
Right. I look forward to seeing some more creative shots with your tilt shift lens.
Yeah, me too. We'll see what we end up with, but it's a fun toy for now, and there's not remorse yet.
Challenge you to come up with 6 great real estate related photos with it.
Challenge
sticking
accepted.
it on the carousel. All right.
You heard that here, Broomfield. You heard that here, listeners.
All right, so let me touch on my Carveout, and then we'll wrap this up. It's really a continuation of last week's. The bike maintenance that's been deferred all summer, and in some cases for years, finally getting to. And the first e-bike I bought, I did my own conversion on a regular frame bike, and I put almost 1,400 miles on it. And it was time to service it, and I thought I could get away with just replacing the chain, but it resulted in this cascade of, all right, now I'm experiencing something called chain suck, and chain suck isn't just the experience internally of how you feel about what's happening; it's the chain wrapping around itself on the front cog on the chain ring. And it makes this horrible grinding sound. It can also completely damage your frame or other components when it happens. And it was really frustrating. So that led to first a fake chain that caused bad chain suck. Then another chain that was from the KMC, the manufacturer, that caused less chain suck, but still some chain suck. And finally I ordered a new front cog and ordered a new cassette. And put those on, and the chain suck is gone.
Nice.
Had to do some adjustments. I was surprised by that. The derailleur needed to be way more adjusted than I would have expected. And when I took off the cassette in the back, I realized that the cone came out with it, and there was so much dirt inside the threads for where the
is it like the race?
Screws on.
I don't know. Okay.
I realized that almost certainly that cone was not very tight at all. And sure enough, the race had a little crinkle in it. Clearly, it had been getting some wear. So I replaced all the ball bearings and put in some new grease into that and put the wheel back together. And I got to say, bike projects are very meditative, and it's nice having enough space in the house with a little workshop. Mm-hmm. And my collection of tools and specialty tools just continues to grow. Like for the last week's bike brake rebuild, it was all about snap ring pliers. And in this particular case, I had all the tools needed, so I didn't really need to buy anything special to do all this work. But I had to open up the Bafang motor, which is the mid-drive. So you're allowed to have, I think, up to 500 watts or something like that. And what attracted me to this build was you could build for off-road use only.
Yep.
This motor was up to 1,500 watts peak and 1,000 watts sustained, and that's
quite a
significantly
bit.
more than is street legal. And some people have been known to over, like you can edit the programming, and they programmed it for 2,000 watts and 3,000 watts, and it's really insane because with a 36 tooth cog on the front and a 9-speed cassette, it will go up an 18-degree slope without me pedaling at all. It will just climb it. And so I don't know why you need
More?
2,000 and 3,000 watts, because I got to tell you, 1,000 sustained and 1,500 peak is plenty.
I bet.
And this bike can have a 30-plus mile range. And if off-road only, of course, it has been clocked at going over 35 miles an hour, which is absurd and dangerous. But that's the world of e-bikes, and it was time for this particular e-bike to go through a pretty significant rebuild. And kind of fun and meaningful to get in there. So I opened up the Bafang mid-drive motor and threw some Mobil 1 synthetic grease in there, because supposedly you should do that at about 1,000 miles. So I did that and put it all back together, and I'm pleased to report the chain suck is gone.
Nicely done. And I bet it, especially after getting everything put back together, lubed up, bearings replaced, that's got to feel really good to ride again.
Felt cool.
Yeah.
It was fun. It just feels good to know you put it together yourself, and it's probably how you feel about your E30 at a much more significant level, the motor swap.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much you're doing it, but right after I finished the E30, I was more worried. Did I get that bolt? Did I tighten that down? Did I make sure to lube that? You know? I really want to talk about the livery on your bike, but...
yeah. The fact that it's a police bike?
Well, the band.
Oh, the band. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not wandering around pretending to be law enforcement, but the donor frame is a Fuji Police Special. And so it has the word police on the side.
And it's going 35 miles an hour off-road.
It looks like a cop bike. And the reason I went with that is that I figured the components would be a little beefier. I don't know if that's actually true or not. But I also figured that in Boulder, with bike theft being so high, it wouldn't hurt me to have police written on the side of my bike.
Yeah.
All right, I heard the doorbell.
That's our open house signs.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah,
great. Okay,
yeah.
new open house signs are here. But it's time to wrap up this podcast, this last Carveout section. Let us know if you find that entertaining or just a total distraction from our normal real estate talk. Hamish, do you want to do the quick wrap up?
Well, let me pull open the notes and make sure I don't miss anything. Dear listener, it's been a while since I've talked you out. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check
you out.
You know,
What does that mean?
You play yourself out type of deal, like we're talking ourselves out.
I have no idea what that means.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks so much for listening. Osmond's going to be talking about quite a few active listings, and you want to make sure you don't miss that. So sign up for the House Einstein newsletter on our website, houseeinstein.com, newsletter tab on the right. Also, check out our YouTube. We have quite a few neighborhood series there, some listings that are active that are definitely worth a look. See us on this weekend, Alpine Ave, 605 Alpine Ave, at a time TBD, but you'll see it on Zillow and on our social medias when it comes out. And 1380 Knox Drive, Sunday, 12 to 2. Sophie, Ian, and potentially me will see you there. Thank you so much for joining us, and as always, we love hearing your feedback. Have a great one.
We'll see you next time.